Now, picture a night in the Colorado Rockies in the summer of 1899. The town of Colorado Springs has gone dark. Every light in the city has been snuffed out. The local power company is furious, and somewhere on the outskirts of town, inside a wooden laboratory crowned with a 200-foot metal tower, a solitary figure in a black coat stands at a bank of switches, unbothered, utterly absorbed. Then he throws the lever. The sky tears open. Bolts of artificial lightning, 130 feet long, erupt from the tower and crack the air like the voice of God. Thunder rolls across the mountains. Ball lightning dances along the ground. The ionized air hisses and glows. For a few extraordinary seconds, this one man has conjured a storm more powerful than anything nature had produced in that valley all year. His name is Nikola Tesla, and what he built that night was not a weapon, not a spectacle. It was proof. Proof that electricity could be pulled from thin air and sent anywhere on Earth, freely, without wires, without meters, without cost. The world was not ready for him. The world may still not be. Welcome to Visionary Chronicles. Before this episode is over, you will hear about a war, not fought with rifles or artillery, but with volts and propaganda and the charred bodies of animals dragged before a horrified public. You will hear about the night Niagara Falls was harnessed and an entire continent lit up, and how the man who made it possible was nearly erased from the history books. You will hear about a tower rising above the Long Island coastline, a tower meant to give the entire world free energy, and the banker who tore it down when he realized he couldn't put a meter on it. You will hear about royalty contracts torn up in a moment of breathtaking generosity, about a Supreme Court ruling that came 6 months too late, about an old man feeding pigeons on the steps of a New York library, wearing a coat that no longer fit, dreaming of inventions that wouldn't be built for another 100 years. And you will hear about room 3327 at the Hotel New Yorker, where, on a freezing January night in 1943, one of the greatest scientific minds in human history died absolutely alone. This is the story of Nikola Tesla, the man who invented the modern world, and whom the modern world forgot. He came into the world during a lightning storm. That detail has been repeated so many times it risks becoming myth, but the records bear it out. Nikola Tesla was born at the stroke of midnight between July 9th and July 10th, 1856, in the small Serbian village of Smiljan, in the region then known as the military frontier of the Austrian Empire, territory that today forms part of Croatia. The midwife, watching the sky crack and flare outside the window, reportedly told his mother that the child would be a child of the storm. His mother, Georgina Duca Tesla, called Juka by those who knew her, looked at her newborn son and said calmly that he would be a child of light. She was right in ways neither of them could have imagined. His father, Milutin Tesla, was a Serbian Orthodox priest, a learned, serious man who wrote poetry and philosophy in his spare hours, and who harbored an almost irrational distrust of mathematics. It would have amused Milutin, had he lived to see it, that his son would one day perform calculus in his head, the way other men hum tunes. Nikola's mother, though formerly uneducated, possessed a staggering mechanical intuition. She invented household tools to make her own work easier, could memorize entire volumes of Serbian epic poetry, and passed something of both gifts, the poetic sensitivity and the mechanical genius, directly to her son. Nikola was the fourth of 5 children, and by every account he was unusual from the start. He had what we would today recognize as a photographic, or more precisely, eidetic, memory. He could read a book once and recite it back verbatim months later. He taught himself to speak 6 languages. He could solve complex mathematical problems without writing a single figure on paper, working the entire computation inside his mind with an accuracy that bewildered his teachers. In later life, he would claim that he could visualize his inventions in 3 dimensions before building them, running them in his imagination, checking for wear, identifying failures, all without ever touching a physical tool. But childhood was not without its darkness. His older brother Dane, widely considered the more gifted of the two, died in a riding accident when Nikola was 5. The family's grief was enormous, and by Tesla's own account in his autobiography, he grew up in the long shadow of a dead brother whom his father could not stop mourning. He threw himself into study with the kind of ferocity that is sometimes less about ambition than about escape. He attended the Higher Real Gymnasium in Karlovac, completing a 4-year course in 3 years. He then enrolled at the Graz University of Technology in 1875, and it was here, in the lecture halls of that Austrian institution, that his life's obsession ignited. A professor demonstrated a Gram dynamo, a machine that could function as both a generator and a motor. Tesla watched it run on direct current, watched the sparks fly from the commutator, the device that reversed the current's direction, and an idea began forming at the edge of his consciousness. What if you didn't need the commutator at all? What if the current could be made to alternate naturally, to rotate, to produce a magnetic field that would turn a motor without any mechanical switching, without any sparks? His professors told him the idea was nonsense, impossible. A rotating magnetic field producing useful mechanical work from alternating current was a physical fantasy. Tesla dropped the subject in public. In his mind, he did not drop it for a single day. His time at Graz ended badly. He had begun gambling, had lost his scholarship money, had failed to sit his final examinations. He was too ashamed to tell his father. He moved to Maribor, took a low-level engineering job, and then collapsed completely. A nervous breakdown of uncertain origin, brought on by overwork, shame, and the peculiar exhaustion of a mind that never truly rested. His father traveled to find him and begged him to come home. Tesla did, and Milutin died shortly after, a loss from which Tesla claimed he never fully recovered. He pulled himself together with characteristic stubbornness. He enrolled at the Charles Ferdinand University in Prague, studied for a time, then took a position with the Continental Edison Company in Paris in 1882. Edison's company was rolling out direct current electrical systems across Europe, and Tesla, brilliant, meticulous, able to work 18-hour days without complaint, quickly distinguished himself as the best electrician on the continent. He was sent to troubleshoot projects in Germany and France. He made the company substantial amounts of money. He fixed problems that senior engineers had declared unfixable, and all the while, the idea kept rotating in his mind. Then one afternoon in Budapest, in 1882, walking through a park with a friend named Antal Szigeti, reciting from memory a passage of Goethe's Faust, Nikola Tesla stopped mid-sentence. He grabbed a stick and drew a diagram in the dirt at his feet. There it was, the rotating magnetic field. The full design, complete and functional, assembled in a single flash of vision after 6 years of unconscious gestation. He had it. He had the alternating current induction motor. He would not build a prototype for another 5 years. But he knew, with the absolute certainty of the genuine visionary, that what he had drawn in the dirt in that Budapest park was going to change everything. In 1884, armed with a letter of recommendation written by his supervisor at Continental Edison, Nikola Tesla sailed for America. He stepped off the boat in New York City with 4 cents in his pocket, a small parcel of his own poems, a collection of mathematical calculations, and the knowledge of a machine that existed, so far, only in his head. The letter he carried was addressed to the most famous electrician in the world, a man named Thomas Alva Edison. It reportedly read, "I know 2 great men, and you are one of them. The other is this young man." Edison was not, by the standards of the era, a scientist. He was an inventor, a distinction he wore with pride. He worked by systematic trial and error, testing thousands of materials, thousands of configurations, until something worked. He employed dozens of researchers. He ran an invention factory. He was also a ferociously effective businessman, a tireless self-promoter, and a man who regarded the work of others with suspicion unless he could claim a share of it. Tesla went to work for Edison almost immediately, and for a time the partnership seemed promising. Tesla was assigned the most difficult engineering problems: redesigning Edison's direct current generators, resolving inefficiencies in the company's electrical systems. He worked without complaint. He was methodical, brilliant, and almost inhuman in his endurance. The story that has come down through history, and which Tesla himself related, is this. Edison allegedly told Tesla that if he could redesign the company's generators and solve a series of persistent engineering problems, there would be $50,000 in it for him. Tesla worked through the night, every night for months. He solved the problems. He went to Edison to collect. Edison laughed. He told Tesla he had been joking, that Tesla did not understand American humor. $50,000 in 1884 was equivalent to well over $1 million today. Tesla had given up months of his life, working 18-hour shifts on the strength of a promise that had apparently never been real. He resigned. What followed was a period of humiliation that Tesla would rarely discuss in later life, but which shaped everything that came after. He founded the Tesla Electric Light Company with backing from New Jersey businessmen, intending to develop and market his AC motor. Instead, his investors stripped the company of its patents and pushed Tesla out, leaving him with nothing but a worthless certificate of stock. To survive, he dug ditches. Nikola Tesla, the man who had designed the power systems of a continent, who had solved problems that Edison's best men could not crack, spent the winter of 1886 working as a manual laborer in the streets of New York City. He was 30 years old. He had 4 cents, again. Then came George Westinghouse. Westinghouse was everything Edison was not, at least in his relationship with Nikola Tesla. He was an engineer himself, holder of patents for the air brake that had revolutionized railroad travel, and he understood, with genuine technical comprehension, exactly what Tesla had built. When the two men met in 1888, Westinghouse had already been exploring alternating current systems for his own company. He saw in Tesla's AC motor and polyphase system the missing piece that would make his own ambitions possible. He paid Tesla $60,000 for the patents. He also agreed to royalties, $2.50 per horsepower of electrical capacity sold. For a technology that Westinghouse intended to scale nationally, those royalties had the potential to make Tesla one of the wealthiest men in America. But first, there was a war to fight. Edison understood, with the sharp instinct of the businessman, exactly what was at stake. His entire empire, the power stations, the lines, the infrastructure he had built across American cities, ran on direct current. If alternating current won, Edison's investment became obsolete. He could not allow that. What followed has come to be called the War of Currents, and it was not a war fought with any dignity. Edison launched a propaganda campaign of remarkable cynicism. He funded demonstrations in which animals, dogs, calves, horses, and eventually, notoriously, an elephant named Topsy at Coney Island, were publicly electrocuted using alternating current, the intention being to demonstrate its lethality and terrify the public into rejecting it. He lobbied state legislatures. He hired engineers to write papers dismissing Tesla's system as inherently dangerous. He attempted to have the word Westinghoused adopted into the American lexicon as a synonym for being killed by electricity. Harold P. Brown, an electrical engineer working with Edison's resources, even developed an alternating current electric chair for the state of New York. The intention being that if AC became synonymous with state execution, the public's revulsion would doom it commercially. Tesla watched all of this with a contempt he did not bother to conceal. He had no stomach for the political theater of commerce. He trusted, with a faith that was almost theological, that the physics would eventually win. And then came Chicago. The 1893 World's Columbian Exposition, the Chicago World's Fair, was the largest public event in American history to that point, a celebration of the 400th anniversary of Columbus's arrival in the Americas. 12 million people would attend. The committee responsible for the fair needed to choose an electrical contractor. Westinghouse, armed with Tesla's AC system, submitted a bid so dramatically lower than Edison's that the committee had little choice. The fair was illuminated with alternating current. 200,000 incandescent lights lit the fairgrounds. People who had never seen electric light in their lives stood in the darkness outside and wept. The war of currents was over. AC had won. 2 years later came Niagara Falls. The idea of harnessing the power of Niagara Falls had been discussed for decades. In 1893, the Niagara Falls Power Company held an international competition to design the world's first large-scale hydroelectric generating station. Tesla's polyphase AC system won. Construction began. On November 16, 1895, power generated at Niagara Falls was transmitted to the city of Buffalo, New York, 26 miles away. The crowds who watched the lights come on that night were witnessing the birth of the modern electrical grid. Tesla had delivered precisely what he had promised: power transmitted across distances that direct current could never manage, at a scale that made industrial civilization possible. He was celebrated in the press. He gave lectures. He was profiled in every magazine of consequence. He stood at the center of the world's attention, and he could have, should have, secured himself and his future for life. But there was still the tower. By the turn of the century, Tesla's imagination had already left electricity behind. He was thinking about something larger: wireless transmission, not just of power, but of information, communication, free energy delivered to any point on the globe without infrastructure, without cost. In 1900, he persuaded J.P. Morgan, the most powerful banker in America, to fund a project on Long Island, $150,000, a laboratory and a tower that would rise 187 feet above the coast of Shoreham, topped by a 55-ton steel hemisphere. Tesla called it Wardenclyffe. He called it a world wireless system. Morgan called it an investment. The two men had different definitions of the word. Tesla envisioned Wardenclyffe as a means of providing every human being on the planet with free electrical power, drawn from the Earth's own electromagnetic field and transmitted through the ground and air simultaneously. It was, by any contemporary standard, an insane idea. It was also, in some respects, ahead of everything that exists today. Morgan began asking questions. He wanted to know how the system would be metered, how the company would charge for the energy being transmitted. Tesla looked at him, puzzled. There would be no meter. The energy would be free. That was the point. Morgan pulled the funding. Construction at Wardenclyffe stopped. The tower stood incomplete. Tesla's other financial backers, seeing Morgan withdraw, followed suit. The dream of free wireless energy for the world died not because the physics was impossible. Tesla's ideas about resonant energy transmission were decades ahead of their time. But because free energy was, by definition, a business model without revenue. Meanwhile, Nikola Tesla had also torn up his royalty contract with George Westinghouse. In 1897, Westinghouse came to Tesla in private. The company was struggling, squeezed by Edison's legal challenges and the enormous costs of scaling up AC infrastructure. The royalty payments owed to Tesla, now running into millions, were threatening to bankrupt Westinghouse Electric. Westinghouse explained the situation plainly and asked if there was anything Tesla could do. Tesla thought for a moment. Then he took the royalty contract from a drawer, tore it into pieces, and told Westinghouse that his faith in the early days had been enough. The royalties were forgiven. It was an act of astonishing, reckless generosity that cost Tesla what might have been a fortune of $100 million or more by the time of his death. And he did it without hesitation. The man who had been cheated of $50,000 by a laugh gave away $100 million without blinking. That is Nikola Tesla. The years after Wardenclyffe were long, and they were cruel. In 1917, the United States government, fearing the tower might be used by German agents as a radio navigation landmark during the First World War, ordered Wardenclyffe demolished. It was blown up with dynamite. Tesla watched it fall from a distance. He was 60 years old. He had no money. He had no laboratory. The greatest project of his life lay in a pile of rubble on the shore of Long Island. He did not stop working, but the work grew increasingly untethered from the practical. He spoke of death rays, of systems that could bring down fleets of aircraft from miles away. He gave interviews in which he described machines capable of splitting the earth in two if run to their logical conclusion. Some of this was genuine scientific intuition, packaged in sensational language for an audience he had learned would only pay attention to the spectacular. Some of it, those who knew him suspected, was the symptom of a mind that had been running at full speed for 60 years without adequate sleep, adequate food, or adequate human companionship. The eccentricities had always been there, but they deepened and hardened with age. Tesla had long insisted on performing every task in multiples of 3. He required 18 napkins at every meal, 18 being divisible by 3. He walked around the block 3 times before entering a building. He was repulsed by round objects, by jewelry, by the hair of other people. He refused to touch anything that was not antiseptically clean, years before germ theory had fully penetrated popular culture, and long after it had become an obsession rather than a precaution. He had never married. He had, by his own account, deliberately sacrificed the possibility of intimate human connection to his work, believing, or perhaps rationalizing, that the two could not coexist. In his final years, his most consistent emotional bonds were with the pigeons of Bryant Park in New York City. He fed them daily. He brought injured birds to his room at the Hotel New Yorker and nursed them. He wrote about them with a tenderness that he had never quite directed at another human being. He lived in room 3327 of the Hotel New Yorker, running up a tab that the management carried largely as an act of reverence for the name. By the 1930s, the name still meant something in certain circles, even as the public memory of his actual contributions grew hazier with each passing year. Part of what had happened was Guglielmo Marconi. In 1901, Marconi transmitted a wireless radio signal across the Atlantic Ocean and was credited by the press, by governments, and eventually by the Nobel Committee with the invention of the radio. He received the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1909. The world celebrated him as the father of wireless communication. Nikola Tesla had been granted the foundational patents for radio transmission in 1897. Many of the specific components Marconi used in his transatlantic transmission had been described in detail in Tesla's earlier patents. Tesla protested. Edison, with characteristic contempt, reportedly dismissed Tesla's objections by saying that Marconi was a good fellow and could be left to get on with it. The legal battle dragged on for years. In 1904, the United States Patent Office, in a decision that many legal historians have since regarded as commercially motivated, reversed Tesla's radio patents and awarded them to Marconi. Marconi's backers included Edison and Andrew Carnegie. Tesla's legal resources were essentially exhausted. He continued to fight. He did not live to see the verdict. On the 7th of January, 1943, a maid at the Hotel New Yorker entered room 3327 to bring a message and found Nikola Tesla dead. He had been dead for some time. He was 86 years old. The cause of death was listed as coronary thrombosis, though his body, a doctor noted, bore the signs of a man who had not been eating adequately for years. He died alone. He died without a family member present. He died in debt. He died in a room full of notebooks and calculations and half-finished designs for machines that no one would understand for decades. 2 days later, on the 9th of January, agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation entered the hotel and seized all of Tesla's papers, notes, and personal effects. The stated reason was national security. Some of his theoretical work, officials feared, might be of interest to enemy powers in the middle of the Second World War. The papers were eventually classified and held by the Office of Alien Property, despite the fact that Tesla had been an American citizen for 55 years. Many of the documents have never been fully released. Then, 6 months after his death, on June 21, 1943, the United States Supreme Court ruled on the long-standing patent dispute over radio. The court overturned Marconi's patents and confirmed that Tesla's earlier work had constituted the foundational invention. Tesla was restored, officially, as the inventor of the radio. He had been dead for 6 months. The recognition, when it came at all, had a habit of arriving just too late. But time has a long arc. The international system of units, the modern scientific standard for measurement, designates the Tesla as the unit of magnetic flux density named in his honor. It sits alongside the Newton, the Watt, the Hertz, the names of the men who shaped how we measure and understand the physical world. In 2003, a technology entrepreneur named Elon Musk co-founded an electric vehicle company. He named it Tesla. He could have named it after Edison, the man who successfully commercialized electrical light. He could have named it after Westinghouse. He named it after the man who understood electricity as a force of nature to be liberated rather than metered, because that is what the company aspired to represent. The internet, too, found Tesla and held him up. In the first decade of the 21st century, as digital culture began reconstructing forgotten histories, Tesla's story spread with the kind of velocity he had always dreamed of for his own transmissions. Instantly, wirelessly across the globe. Documentaries were made, graphic novels were written. The face of a gaunt, pale Serbian inventor from the 19th century appeared on t-shirts and laptop stickers in every city on Earth. He had always believed that information should move freely. He would have appreciated the irony. What do we do with Nikola Tesla? The easy version of his story is the one that goes viral. The misunderstood genius robbed of his legacy by greedy men, the lonely prophet ahead of his time, the martyr of the corporate age. And there is enough truth in that version to make it satisfying. But the complete version is harder and more useful. Tesla was not merely a victim of circumstance. He was a man of extraordinary capability who made choices, some transcendent, some catastrophic, that shaped the course of his life with as much force as anything done to him by Edison or Morgan or the patent office. He tore up the Westinghouse royalty contract freely. He trusted Edison's word without a written agreement. He spent years on Wardenclyffe before realizing, or perhaps before allowing himself to admit, that his patron needed to make money, and his invention deliberately prevented that. He had no business instinct, and he never tried to develop one, because he regarded commerce as beneath the work. That is a luxury that only the wealthy can afford, and Tesla was not wealthy. It was a conviction that cost him everything. The first lesson of his life is one that the modern creative economy has had to learn, often painfully, over and over again. Brilliance without structure is fragile. Your ideas are only as protected as the agreements that surround them. Your vision is only as durable as the resources you can marshal to sustain it. The world will not organize itself around your genius. You have to do some of that organizing yourself, or you have to find people who will do it for you and whom you can genuinely trust. Tesla found Westinghouse and gave him everything. He found Morgan and gave him nothing he could sell. The difference in outcomes was not accidental. The second lesson is about the nature of recognition itself. Tesla spent the last decades of his life watching his contributions be minimized, misattributed, or ignored entirely, and the bitterness was real and understandable and, here is the crucial thing, ultimately beside the point. The physics did not care who received the credit. Alternating current lit the world regardless of whose name appeared on the patent office filings. The rotating magnetic field kept spinning in every motor on every continent, whether or not a single schoolbook mentioned the man who conceived it. There is something both tragic and strangely liberating in that. Tesla believed in his work with a completeness that his belief in himself never matched. He was, by the accounts of those who knew him well, plagued by self-doubt, even as he appeared publicly imperious. He needed recognition more than he let on, and the absence of it hollowed him out over the long years of his isolation. What he perhaps could not see, what the Supreme Court ruling, the SI unit, the electric car company, the millions of internet tributes have since made clear, is that recognition deferred is not recognition denied. It is only recognition delayed. The arc of intellectual history is long, and it tends, with considerable slowness and occasional injustice, to bend toward accuracy. The third lesson is about sacrifice, and it is the hardest one. Tesla gave everything: his health, his relationships, his fortune, his old age, his peace of mind. All of it was fed into the engine of the work. He died alone in a hotel room, and the choice, if it can be called that, to live as he did, was made 1,000 times over the course of a long life. Every time he chose the laboratory over the dinner party, every time he dismissed a potential friendship as a distraction, Every time he looked at the royalty contract that could have made him rich and decided that Westinghouse mattered more than the money. Was it worth it? That is not a question with a clean answer. Tesla himself seemed to believe, in his better moments, that it was. He once said that the present is theirs. The future, for which I really worked, is mine. And in some important sense, he was right. We live, every one of us, inside the infrastructure of his imagination. The electricity that powers the device on which you are watching these words was almost certainly generated and transmitted using principles that Nikola Tesla established in the last 2 decades of the 19th century. He is everywhere and invisible, which is exactly where he always wanted to be. Not the face of the technology, but the force behind it, as fundamental and unattributed as gravity. So let this episode be a small act of attribution. Let it be the thing we owe him, not pity, not mythologizing, but attention. Honest, clear-eyed attention to what he built, and how he built it, and what it cost him, and what it gave the world. He was not a saint. He was not a martyr. He was a man who could see things that other men could not, and who spent his entire life trying to show them to the rest of us, and who ran out of time before the rest of us caught up. We caught up. This has been Visionary Chronicles.